Alrighty, my dear little friends. So today we're going to be talking about birds. So today we're going to be talking, and I'm going to show you today that only an amazing God could have created birds. Well, they pull up the PowerPoint. Perfect. So one scientist did a calculation and figured out that for a human like me, I need to have wings that are 140 feet long and have chest muscles that are 6 feet wide for me to be able to fly. So my wings would have to be longer than this whole church for me to fly. For thousands of years, people have attempted to fly, but only in the last 100 years have we finally figured out how to do it. Today, we have millions of airplanes in the sky, but none of them fly as effortlessly as birds do. Birds do not need air traffic controls like airplanes do, but have you ever seen two birds hit each other in the sky? A bird just needs a few strokes of their wings to start flying, yet an airplane needs miles and miles of runway to be able to fly. Birds can take care of themselves, heal themselves, but an airplane needs a crew of highly specialized and very smart people to keep that airplane flying. A jet fighter can use over 400 gallons of fuel in 1 minute to fly, but this bird that you see up here on the PowerPoint can dive bomb at 200 miles an hour on just a little mouse, and that's all what it needs. God created birds to be much more complicated than airplanes. So the biblical basis that we're going to be talking today is out of Job chapter 12, verses 7 through 9. But now ask the beasts, and they will teach you, and the birds of the air, and they will tell you. Or speak to the earth, and it will teach you, and the fish of the sea will explain to you. Who among all of these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this, in whose hand is the life of every living thing and the breath of all mankind? We can learn a lot about birds because it is God who created them. Birds display God's power, wisdom, and majesty. Evolution has no explanation for the design of birds because a bird needs to be able to fly right away. You cannot have a bird that's only half ready to fly. For a bird to exist, it had to be created by God because their design is much more complicated than chance or a series of mistakes could have ever created. My goal today is to show you that only a big and amazing God could have actually created birds. To prove this to you, I'm going to be talking about three things. I'm going to be talking about how well birds can see, how God created their feathers, and how far birds can actually fly. So to start off, I have a little graph here that shows what we can see compared to what birds can see. So there are three primary colors. We all go to art class and we learned about the three primary colors of blue, green, and red. And if we take multiple of these colors and we mix them together, we get all the other colors of the rainbow. We have all mixed these colors in art class and we know how this works. So the only reason you're able to see all the colors of the rainbow is because you have three sensors in your eyeball that is able to sense blue, green, and red. And when the light hits millions of these sensors that you have in your eyeballs, it creates a little message, it sends it off to your brain, and that is how you're able to see everything around you. But since God is an amazing God, He gave birds an extra fourth sensor. And this fourth sensor is able to sense ultraviolet light. So this means that birds are able to see colors that we as humans will never be able to see. And God created birds with this amazing ability so that they would be able to find food much quicker in the wilderness. Certain types of foods and berries, they have a different type of color that the birds can pick up much easier than we can. And the reason for that being is that they can see that ultraviolet light reflected off of those plants and foods. The other really interesting thing is how well birds can actually see. So on the left side of the image, you see So these are those color sensing lights cells that are in the back of your eyeballs. And birds have 2 to 5 times as many of these sensors, making their vision at least 2 to 3 times better than the vision that we have as humans. And also, the really cool thing is that God created birds with eyeballs that are in different positions of their head. So, as you see, there's on the left image, you see there the word pigeon, and pigeons have eyeballs that are on the sides of their head. That way, they can see everything that's going on around them, and they're able to see food, and then once they come up really close to that food, they can pick it out very quickly. But birds like owls on the right side and eagles, their eyeballs are very similar to our eyeballs, and they're mostly in the front. And God created them to be like that so that they can fly really fast and catch their prey very quickly. The next amazing thing that God created were feathers, and feathers have to be developed in such a way that evolution or chance could have never created a feather on its own. Feathers grow very similarly to how human hair grows. It starts growing in the deepest portion of your skin, and it slowly starts developing as this little bump, as you see under number 1. While a feather is growing, it is very fragile, and any type of damage will totally destroy that feather. So what God created for these feathers is this little white capsule that protects. It kind of acts like a little cocoon for that developing feather. And once the feather is fully formed, that capsule falls off, and that's how you get to number 6, as you see in that image, where that feather is fully grown and ready to fly. God also created feathers to have these interlocking barbs and barbules. You can see them on the image there. So feathers are God's first Velcro. So Velcro has one projection that is straight, and then it has another projection that is has like a little hook on there, and that way all those feathers, they can stay nice and straight. If a feather ever breaks apart, all what a bird has to do is just run its beak along those outgrowths and reconnect all those barbs and barbules, just like you would for Velcro, and that feather is ready to fly once again. God could design feathers with this mechanism because it is a very strong, durable, quickly fixable, and extremely light design. We often think that airplanes are really cool, but don't forget that airplane wings, they're always in one position, they never move. But a bird is flapping their wings 100 times a second for hummingbirds and much slower for other birds. But nonetheless, those wings are constantly flapping. They're hitting leaves, twigs, and all sorts of stuff as they fly through the forest. But those birds, they never fall down because they break one of their wings. Unlike airplanes, if it hits a bird, airplane can very easily fall out of the sky. But the most amazing thing I feel like about these feathers is how air moves with these feathers. So whenever a bird is flapping their wings down, those barbs and barbules, they come in really close, and that way creates a really airtight system, and that way the bird can flap its wings down very efficiently. But God also created these feathers to open up on the upstroke. So whenever the bird is lifting up their wings, all those barbs and barbules are opening up, and it makes it much easier for the bird to bring its wings up. So once it flaps down, all those barbs and barbules, they close down, and when the bird lifts its wings up, all those barbs and barbules open up. It's super amazing. And God didn't only create one type of feather, He created 7 types of feathers. So the first one, those are wing feathers. As you see, they're very similar shaped to the wings of our airplanes, a very thin front portion and a long back portion, and it kind of creates the Bernoulli effect. If you ever go home, you take a piece of paper, you put it underneath your lip, and you start blowing air, that piece of paper is going to start coming up. Just go home and try to do it, and that is how that is how a wing feather works. Down feathers, they keep you warm. Tail feathers, they're kind of like a boat rudder. They direct where that bird is going to fly. Contour feathers, this just creates a much more aerodynamic design for the bird. Semi-plume, they're kind of a blend between the contour and the down, keeps the bird warm and also keeps it very aerodynamic. Bristles, those ones help protect the bird's eyes and face. They kind of act like a helmet for the bird. And the phyloplumes, those are kind of like your cat whiskers. They tell the bird where that bird is flying. And I just had to throw this in, peacock feathers. They're super amazing. So the image on the left that you see, that is a compilation of 40 different photographs that were taken at different layers of the bird's feather to give you all that detail and amazing and intricate design. And if you look really, really closely, you're going to be able to see the bristle, the barbs, and the barbules in there. I just thought I would throw that one in. Flying range. God created birds to fly really, really far. One scientist, recently this only happened, they took a bar-tailed godwit, the one that you see on the right, they attached a very tiny GPS tracker to it, and they just wanted to see how far this bird could fly. So this bird usually lives up in Alaska, and it eats all sorts of seafood that is on the shore there. And during the fall, right about maybe a couple of months ago, they started flying down over to New Caledonia, Papua New Guinea, New Zealand, and as you see, also a little bit to Australia. So all the way all across the world. And with this tiny GPS tracker, they found that this bird flew a little bit under 8,000 miles in almost 9 days. So imagine flying 8,000 miles in over 9 days. So this bird, if we take the United States, it's about 2,800 miles long. We do the math so that they pretty much flew across the United States 3 times in around 9 days. And this is a very small bird. It's not that big, and it flies much better than any airplane, much more efficiently. But the most amazing thing is that this bird flew nonstop for 9 days. There's no land for this bird to land, and it just flew for 8,000 miles. When I was initially reading about this bird, I was looking at it and I was like, this bird kind of looks pretty boring, but because it's all brown, there's nothing much interesting going on with it. But when you start looking at God's design in this bird, it is absolutely amazing. Common swifts. We used to live in Minnesota, and we had a lot of these relatives of these birds fly. But this specific bird, this is the common swift, and this bird spends pretty much all of its lifetime in the air. The only time it really lands is for 2 months to grow its chicks. So scientists also attach various tiny GPSs to these birds, and they found out that these birds fly nonstop for 10 months between Europe and sub-Saharan Africa and back. And these common swifts do it nonstop, and they never ever land. So this makes the common swift the world record holder for the longest continual flight time of anything that could ever possibly fly. Airplanes that we fly on today, they need an inspection every 100 hours of flight time. But this common swift never takes a landing during the course of 7,200 hours of flight time. And to top that off, this bird has a wingspan of about 16 inches long, and it weighs a little bit over 1 piece of, you know how you guys have bread at home? You probably had some bread this morning. So if you take 1 slice of bread, that's pretty much all what this bird weighs. Maybe a battery and a half, 15 pennies, 7 quarters. Do the math. It's a very light bird, 16-inch wingspan, but God created it to fly for 7,200 hours non-stop. And the most interesting thing is that the longest commercial flight that we have in the whole world is only 17 hours. So this bird probably thinks that 17 hours is a piece of cake for it. I think that this clearly shows that God does indeed exist. Oh, and I forgot to mention that this bird can live up to 20 years old. And this bird does the flight from Europe to sub-Saharan Africa every single year. A professor in Sweden from Lund University did a little study, and he found out that these swifts could fly from the Earth to the moon in its lifetime about 7 times during its lifetime. And that's only for one bird. And imagine how many millions of birds God created like this. So in conclusion, Genesis 1:31. Then God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. If we look very closely at how God designed birds, we have no excuse not to believe in the existence of God. God's wisdom in designing birds is evident in how well birds can see, how amazingly God designed their feathers, and how efficiently they're able to fly. There is no possibility that these systems could have worked perfectly together if they were not created by God. Therefore, that is why we can look at God's creation, be totally amazed by it, and give God glory for his amazing birds. Amen.